You had not met David Coburn before? The provost? The previous provost? No.
Right?
No. I'm saying people is very serious. They don't even talk, you know? They don't even chat. We are not in Puerto Rico.
That's for sure.
Oh, the dean is here.
Chair just a little bit back and I can see Nancy a little better.
The dean is here. Our dean.
Very
Nice. Wonder about those napkins there, shall we? Shall we just consolidate over there in case more people come? Let's see, sound test.
Testing. You guys want to test your mics?
Testing.
That works. Nancy.
You have to switch it on. On the top here.
Who's got the mics? There you go.
Now it's
I got
on.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're good. All right, we're good to go. Well, I want to welcome you all here. I'm Joe Kays. I'm the editor of Explore Magazine, which is the university's research magazine. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening for the latest in our Explore More series, where we take a story that was in Explore and go dive in a little deeper with it. With Explore Magazine, we have the privilege of sharing the university's best research stories 3 times a year. And if you're interested in receiving Explore, we've got some copies back there. And also you can go to the website explore.research.ufl.edu and click on the subscribe button. It's free. So tonight we're going to learn about the heroic efforts of faculty from the University of Florida and other institutions to help Puerto Rico rebuild after the devastation of Hurricane Maria in a way that will better prepare the island for future storms and serve as an example for other places impacted by natural disasters. Martha Cohen and Nancy Clark are co-directors of the Center for Hydro-Generated Urbanism in the UF College of Design, Construction, and Planning. The center is developing new approaches to the evolution of water-based settlements, from retrofitting existing cities to envisioning future development on the water. Martha served as director of the UF School of Architecture from 2003 to 2008. She's a member of the UNESCO Chair on Sustainable Urban Quality and Culture and a visiting professor at La Sapienza Rome University. Nancy's research in urban resilience and development for coastal cities has been recognized internationally through exhibitions, awards, and lectures in many countries. Our moderator is Cindy Spence. She's a longtime Florida journalist and UF's senior science writer. So I'm about to turn it over to Cindy, but one last reminder, please silence your cell phones, and then we'll get the discussion started.
Testing. So Puerto Rico was already reeling from Hurricane Irma when Hurricane Maria hit the island on September 20th of 2017. Many towns directly in the path of the storm reported devastation, 80 to 90% of structures destroyed. And the island's fragile utility grid went down as well, taking clean water and communication capabilities with it. The reaction for Martha and Nancy and their students was immediately compassionate, but in addition to that, they had an intellectual and academic response that we want to talk to them about tonight that will carry into many years into the future. Martha and Nancy and University of Puerto Rico collaborators quickly organized Puerto Rico Restart in March, an international 10-day workshop that took a small army of 104 students and 35 professors from 5 U.S. and European universities to examine the situation firsthand, a sort of boots-on-the-ground approach. So we'll start there, and I'll start with both of you. Can you tell us what you found when you got to Puerto Rico in March?
Well, before arriving, I should say, we received here professors and students that were funded by the Office of Research of the university. So that was the original gesture that enabled them to come. And once they were here, they described at length and gathered information regarding what the devastation was about. So when we arrived to the island, we were quite prepared. What we saw was a widespread, low-grade devastation. Shall we say the roads were still there, the main public buildings are still there, but the neighborhoods were covered by blue tarps, and there was no solution at site immediately to be enacted. So all this devastation was on top of the lack of maintenance on chronic, shall we say, economic foes that the island had been going through. So that lack of maintenance aggravated the situation, both in the residential sector and in the infrastructural sector.
Okay. Yeah. Nancy, you had your own perspective?
When we got there, which was March, 5 months after, some of the towns that I was working in for my design lab still didn't have power. And were still cut off with the main road down to their jobs and their work. So it was still pretty devastating.
Okay. And the workshop experienced its own, had its own experience with the fragile nature of the utility grid.
Yes.
You were camped or set up at the University of Puerto Rico when the power went out. Can you tell us how you regrouped?
Yes, well, fortunately, there is a solidarity network between the higher education institutions, and we not only had the University of Puerto Rico on board, but the Polytechnic University, the University of Turabo, and so from the island, I mean, and so through the contacts between professors in these institutions is that we were able to move the whole army of designers and to the Polytechnic University, and they took us in. We were camping in their staircases, and we were camping in their auditorium, but it allowed us to actually finish the product we were trying to achieve.
But they were able to improvise. Well, we didn't have any power, but one of the geomorphologists wanted to still give his lecture, so he gave it outside in the open air without his slides or anything. So very able to quickly react and adapt and continue on.
And it didn't seem like when I got there, I arrived at the Polytechnic, and it didn't seem like the students were fazed by this at all. They were very focused.
Yes, the students, I think, were very enthusiastic from the very beginning. The ones we took, and the ones that came from Italy, and the ones that came from New York, the ones that were from the island. So they formed these very dynamic teams that were, working into the night on the proposals. They were very enthusiastic. They couldn't care about the conditions, I think.
Okay. All righty. Now, the conference was, this workshop was divided into design labs, and Nancy, you were leading the first design lab that focused on the mountains to the coast and the needs of that region. Can you tell us about that design lab?
Well, just a little bit about the 5 design labs that we tried. The research that Martha did with the students in the fall generated this idea of the sort of 5 key issues that needed to be quickly thought through as a design-led workshop. So one of the main issues was the flooding of the rivers. And so we felt like we had to dedicate a workshop to take a river basin approach. So if you understand Puerto Rico, it has sort of a central east-west ridge of mountains, and then there's rivers that run north and south to the coast. So the idea was a really trans-jurisdictional approach, right? Because of the watershed doesn't mind boundaries, and also an integrated approach where a lot of issues will be looked at through water management infrastructure as the primary driver. And so we picked 3 what we thought were quintessential towns, one in the mountains, one in the floodplains, and one on the coast, and studied, visited them, spoke with community members, and identified critical issues for each one of them. So for example, in the mountain, isolation, lack of communication, telecommunications, but also physical connection was an issue. The inability to be self-sustaining. They lost power, they were still out of power. And also landslides. It was an area where there was a lot of landslides that compromised the transportation infrastructure. And then in the floodplains, where there was should be an opportunity to increase the capacity of the watershed in the river basin, there was a lot of informal settlements that had built houses in the wetlands. So where we could, we had an idea to introduce a wetland park and try to claim the remaining part of that land for increase the river basin. And then on the coast, Louisa was the town, and it was culturally important, historically culturally important. So even though it was very vulnerable socially and physically, there was an idea to really invest in protecting it. So with some minor relocation, we introduced what we called a community hub and concentrated our efforts on stormwater management because it's nuisance flooding and very unhealthy. So in combination, we tried to connect all these towns through this water management strategy.
Okay. And there were design labs about resilient housing. Martha, can you talk about that, about the design lab?
Though to complete the reasoning regarding what were the outstanding capacities of this workshop is that it was interdisciplinary and that we got inputs from the island experts and from especially, from authorities and local agencies, and it was able to break the sectorial approach, which is so much what FEMA does. That FEMA has, developed this, the energy people that try to fix the energy, the transportation that tries to fix the roads. But with this approach that is a water basin based, we're able to integrate all these things.
So more holistic.
Yes. On the housing, we have 3 different points of interest. The first one, I would say, was the informal settlements, which is a broad category of dwellings, because it's not only dwellings in the floodable areas, but also all the informal additions to the initial shall we say, resilient nucleus that many of the houses have, and they are done in an unsustainable way and they suffered a lot of damage. So there is this realm of housing. Then there is the old, shall we say, from the 50s and 60s, big public housing that is deteriorated and that has social problems as well, and we looked with that. And also a third category, which would be abandoned buildings. You know, abandonment is one of the difficulties of the island. This comes from decades old of migration to the United States, to the mainland, I should say. By now, we have 6 million Puerto Ricans in the mainland, and a lot of abandoned properties that can become residential, that can become collective shelters, or so we looked into that as well.
Okay.
I would just add a little bit about the abandoned buildings. You know, the beginning with the decade-long 2006, the economic recession, you saw abandonment. So this was happening for a while.
The diaspora was already there, and then
Yeah.
it grew after the hurricane.
And then there was some 160,000 people who left after the year after Maria. So in the end, 18% of the housing stock was vacant, and more than 50% of that was considered foreclosure or just complete abandonment. So the statistics, so we're talking 300,000 housing units. But also there's 265 schools that were closed. Again, over time, not just because of Maria, but Maria exacerbated it. So you know, there's an idea that especially these informal settlements, the governor wants to eradicate them. Right? So make them legal, make them resilient in some of the places, but some of the places they can't because it's floodable, continuously floodable. So the idea is to make affordable housing, convert these into affordable housing, for example. And one of the ways they're talking about doing is the CDBG funds,
Right.
which is 18 billion, which is buying up large parts of these vacant properties and retrofitting them and making them resilient. So,
And the abandoned public buildings represent an opportunity.
An opportunity,
Absolutely.
exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And they are widespread. You know, in the city of San Juan alone, there are 44,000 buildings that are abandoned. Now, there are legal issues, there are procedural issues, there are funding issues that has to be orchestrated at the same time as the project, shall we say, or the ideas about reuse. Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Another design lab focused on using shipping containers. This seems like a really innovative idea. Here's a readily available resource that is small and compact and portable. So how are they usable as emergency cores?
It's particularly relevant to Puerto Rico because it's an island, and so much transportation occurs in the maritime way. So the first thing we identified was that there were more than 200 localities that were isolated and that became isolated for a month or 2 or 3 up in the mountains. So how to breach that gap was envisaged by the transformation of these containers into a series of highly sophisticated relief modules that you could take with a truck and locate in these remote conditions. And so there will be a medical one, a communications one, a sanitary one, a community-oriented one, so that you could compose 4 or 5 of these into some abandoned school or in some public area and guarantee the primary, shall we say, communication systems or the primary health issue solutions for the communities that become isolated. It's not that easy to break that isolation because the settlement is like a filigrane. It's up in the mountains with treacherous roads.
So in our design lab, we hybridized it. We used some of the containers from that design lab, and we retrofitted a school as a community hub. So
We have one professor that specializes in the School of Architecture. He's in City Lab Orlando, and he's building right now here in Gainesville one big component up in 16th Avenue and
Yeah.
on containers. Yes.
Very interesting. So some of the design labs incorporated the emergency cores, the shipping containers, as everyday places too, kiosks, bike shops, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, there are multiple possibilities. I mean, the owner of one of the companies is a alum from the University of Florida. So we envisage that there could be, as a further step, the donation of some of these unused modules that are in parking spots. Right? They are just stationed there to be industrialized for these purposes.
And these are available so that the people who live there can or use these kits to outfit it as a sanitation unit or a communications unit or whatever they need
Theoretically.
Yeah. It's
in development.
no, that is challenging. I mean, you need welders. You need. I mean, it's not like a wood construction. You know,
Right.
it's metal construction. So it requires a workshop and adequate technologies. Yes, but the raw materials are there.
Okay. All right. And then the final design lab focused on developing underutilized facilities such as an abandoned railroad line, an airport hangar. Nancy, can you talk a little bit about what ideas emerged for better using these facilities?
You can talk more about it. I think she worked on it.
Okay, we got especially interested the UNESCO and the Italian professors that came. There are opportunities that we see coming from the exterior that are unused opportunities, right? So we were centering into 3 or 4 main ideas regarding this. One is, during the sugarcane cycle, the Americans built a railroad. It's called the American Railroad. It linked the ports with the sugarcane factories and fields, and that goes all around the island, and it's still there, and you still have the right of way. So why not reuse this as a link, as a tourism trail, as maybe even a transportation facility of some sort to highlight the history of Puerto Rico. And then another one that was very interesting is we now talk of transit-oriented development. We're trying to implement that. They do have a metropolitan train that is incomplete. So it could carry 1 million passengers a day. It carries 30,000. So the extension of this wouldn't be such a far-fetched idea, but also the reuse of the land that is in the stations that right now is dedicated to parking lots into a density hubs and commercial locations, so that it really serves the purpose as a communication between jobs and between residential areas. So there are also, I must say, dismissed bases, military bases. There's one in particular that is being looked into, quite important port in the east of the island, and that we can fantasize about, or we can speculate, shall we say, about possibilities about the reuse of dismissed bases. The same thing happens with industrial areas, that were occupied when the tax incentives were appropriate for the business, and then abandoned partially, so there is an industrial, shall we say, base, which is an economic opportunity when you come anew to see how this can be restructured.
In fact, there are many abandoned old pharmaceutical industrial buildings throughout the island that we're looking at retrofitting.
Okay. It looked like from the jury you had after the design labs that the people who were from Puerto Rico, who were part of your jury, welcomed all of these ideas. What has the response been?
We were very careful at the beginning to invite the local stakeholders and listen carefully to what were their ambitions or their expectations. And we worked then for 10 days, and for the final juries, they were there in the room, is to say mayors or planners or local professionals or academics or students or agencies. And so that is a fundamental aspect that you're calling our attention to, because if there is no give back, how is this gonna benefit the island? So I think we do these workshops from a totally, shall we say, detached point of view. We are not owning businesses there. We are not connected to any political party. We are really on the research side. So we are able to come with new ideas, refreshing ideas that to be put up out there in the table for consideration, for discussion, for opening the box to new ideas.
But I would add that since then, because we put together an executive report and showed it and spread it around, and we have created an incredible coalition. The Army Corps of Engineers, we've met with them, they're very interested in some of the ideas. FEMA, of course, it's in your article, is instrumental moving forward, NGOs, as well as the schools. So I think that from that effort, which was quick, intense, we've built a really strong coalition to move forward.
The workshop was instrumental in connecting these. There were 990, I think someone mentioned, that were active on the island, and yet not really collaborating. And so the workshop was sort of the beginning of this collaboration. Is that correct?
We have a partner which we acquired after all our interests in Puerto Rico, and this is City University of New York. And so Hunter College and the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, they have been centered their research on the diaspora, but when this disaster occurred, they started understanding or searching how to collaborate with the island, and started assembling a data bank that includes these, and they serve as a clearinghouse. I have any sort of a problem of accessing any data or wanting to talk with anybody, the only thing I have to do is call New York. The data center, the data bank has become this source of information, and all our work now is in that data bank in New York. So people call us from that.
And that's how FEMA found you, right?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
the FEMA.
exactly.
It's back to Centro, but I think they also appreciate our design research, which is something that they don't do. So that has been sort of informative for some of their reports.
They are sociological, economics, predictions, projections. They don't have the design components that we have. They are starting with a GIS base to put all the information in that, and so they are very useful. We use them.
And research has continued since the conference. This past fall, your class, the class you were co-teaching, was active on the island and here for 16 weeks here in the semester, working again on the river basins. Nancy, can you talk a little bit about that?
Continuing that, and in fact, this semester we have another seminar on another river basin.
Okay.
So trying to, the three river basins address different issues, and so the idea is to use them as kind of prototypes that could be repeated. Strategies can be repeated throughout the island, with the idea that maybe there could be a visioning plan that included all the 30 rivers, main rivers, from these three exercises. So it's been really interesting to compare the three river basins. We just started on the third one,
Okay.
San Juan.
I would say something dramatic, okay? Let's introduce some drama. So the real drama. So when Puerto Rico started developing in the 50s, they built dams in all these 50 rivers, not all of them, the main ones. So these dams are up in the mountains, and then as the technology changed to oil-based generation of energy, they have been practically abandoned. So there has been no maintenance in the dams. So they fill up with silt. Nice. I mean, the level comes up and up. So during the storm, what Nancy was saying before, we have these dams that don't have the capacity to take in this storm and the rain. So the Army Corps of Engineers has no alternative but to open the dams and send water downstream at the same time as the ocean is surging from the storm and doesn't allow the rivers to evacuate the water. And so it backs into creeks and rivers, that neighborhoods that were never flooded before. So to solve this kind of issues, you need a whole basin approach, which is what we are trying to see about foresting the surroundings of the dams and securing their stability, to restoring electrical power. There are many co-ops in local communities, especially in the mountains, that are interested. At least we know of 3 into restoring electric power through hydro-generated electricity. Yeah.
But the Transportation Summit that I moderated the session, Ecological Urbanism, we had the Army Corps of Engineers on that panel. And there's sort of evolution of non-structural methods that they're trying to incorporate.
Right, you had mentioned green infrastructure as a
Exactly.
means of controlling water, basically.
So that's what they want to partner with us on some of these river basins, because they have plans in the works already for some structural alterations, and they're looking, again, reflecting on it, and they're trying maybe non-structural methods, green infrastructure. So.
Okay.
Yeah, by the time it hits the execution project, it has been 10 years since its inception. So many of the things that they are trying to implement now have to be revised. Yeah.
And you're starting on another workshop, right? Another Puerto Rico restart. Can you tell us when that will be?
Exactly a year later than the
Exactly
first
a year.
one. It's March 22nd to 30th. There's again receiving an important delegation from UNESCO, the UNESCO chair, La Sapienza, and some universities in Brazil as well are coming, and some from Mexico. And we are taking our classes, which are
Graduate and undergraduate.
About 30 students, 3 professors. We are going and be joined by the island experts, and we have made headways, I must say, with the planning board. So the planning board participates in these workshops. They like to see what ideas can be generated. So the host is going to be the Polytechnic University this time, and because the University of Puerto Rico is in repair. I mean, only now they are fixing the damages that they have withstood. Yeah.
I would say the difference between the last workshop and this one is that FEMA, those agencies are going to be much more integrated into the workshops themselves,
Okay,
which is an important step for us.
very important.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that this won't really end this spring. It may not end even in 5 or 10 years. Where do you see the future going with this research and the student involvement in it?
I think the implementation phase is 10 years of the funding. We are still trying to solve the issues from Katrina in New Orleans. So there's going to be room for, we say, collaboration and visualization and investigation of what we say scenarios. Is to say, right now we are a bit ambitious in that we want to create alternatives for the year 2045. As Joe was saying, this is a one opportunity that we have to use a relatively small island into becoming a model of how we rebound from something like this. That's it's going to take 10 years. We know that. The courses are going to accompany. We are applying to grants, multiple grants, different levels. So I think we can generate funds for students to be part of this research and carry it on. It spans all the disciplines, so we are hoping that more people will join us from other disciplines. We already have some partners from other disciplines. In the college itself, of course, we do have a multiple disciplines, but in the built environment and focusing on the resilience of the built environment, but in engineering, in law, in real estate, there are other partners in the campus.
And you mentioned government agencies now being involved, this time FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers, but academia has its own role. How do you envision the role of research in your architectural field in this recovery?
I follow this from a perspective of 30 years, okay? I've seen academia being the free agent, in a way, that is not the administrator that is all, has to keep the light bulbs going on and the machine running. It's not, academia is not the developers or the builders that want to come and do things. And so we have a longer term perspective and we can create scenarios for the future. We can acquire or propose longer alternative routes and views that I don't think the government can, or the people who are under the pressure of resolving immediate problems are so able to do. So I think academia, we saw this in different moments in history, in Europe, in Latin America, that academia can really contribute to create out-of-the-box solutions and more daring proposals to be submitted to the public opinion, of course. I mean, we are not executors.
Right. And Nancy, you
But
mentioned that Puerto Rico realizes it needs to do something different.
Absolutely. Well, I would add to what Martha said is, and then for us with design, we visualize it, right? We help people imagine and help shape sort of ideas and community goals. So it's really important that we communicate visually ideas. It's very important.
Yeah, when you put drawings of what it could be, people are more quick into understanding and be able to discuss it and advance it than just left to the imagination.
And Puerto Rico has 78, Puerto Rico is small. It fits within Broward and Miami-Dade County. It's about that, smaller than that. 78 municipalities. maybe a previous way of doing this would be to divide the funds up between the municipalities, but I really feel like Puerto Rico has a different idea now with the core three, which is recovery, reconstruction, and resilience. And everything's running through this core three office, and there's this idea of a more comprehensive approach to the funding. So it's an island-wide resilience effort. And so the resilience is a key piece of this now, and they see themselves as being a model for other areas.
And the UNESCO sees it as, funds are going to come, big funds are going to come, important sums are going to be spent in the island, and this could be a model or an experimental a way of resolving many of the issues. That's why we think it's so important, and that it's important for us that we have the support of the university, and that we have the support of the college and the school, and that we are able to carry this forward, because it's a scalable, probably, model that can apply in the Pacific. And Nancy organized a year ago, after Maria, actually, right? After Maria, the International Network of Tropical Architecture Conference, where people came from across the globe. And now she is involved into organizing the next one, but it's going to be in Asia this time. But they are very interested to follow, the tropical part of the world has similar problems.
Well, the title of the conference was Tropical Storms Are the Setting for Adaptive Development. And we had no idea how devastating the season would be, ending with Maria,
And we were
of course.
planning it, yeah.
And so we were actually able to have a delegation from Puerto Rico, as well as some of the other islands in the Caribbean. And so it kind of became a focus of the conference.
One final question here. Martha, you've said that you think UF is uniquely positioned to do this work. Why do you think that?
We are close by. There are others in Miami, but they have their own more pressing backyard problems. We are the 8th public university. We have all the specialties. I mean, it's you name it and we have it. Okay, so we can construct together a team for any challenge. Absolutely, we can. We have research facilities. We showcase to people in the island. We brought them here. They thought this is amazing. From the wind simulations to, I mean, you name it. We have it, and also we share with the islands the climate, the storms. The Latino-based population that we also have. So we are able to understand, I think, more what the situation is in Puerto Rico than Illinois.
And Florida has an important diaspora of Puerto Ricans.
It sure does.
In fact, we're second to New York, but for the exodus from Maria, we were first. So we have in Orlando especially.
Any closing comments before we open up for questions? No?
Well, I think it was started by chance in a way, though we have been looking at Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, Jacksonville. We have been looking at things in Africa, in Europe, in many other places. But this opportunity just was unique. And the Office of Research was able to capture that opportunity by offering to bring people from the island for a temporary basis, unlike other universities that try to capture their students and keep them. No, here in UF, I think we had a very sustainable for Puerto Rico attitude about let them breathe here for some time and then back. But that constructed this relationship that we cannot walk away from now anymore.
Okay.
But definitely look at our website because we have lots of projects in Florida as well. Florida has been
The
a
Center
focus.
for Hydro-Generated Urbanism, co-directed by these two professors.
chu.dcp.ufl.
And you've been looking at sea level rise and all those kinds of issues in the Caribbean anyway.
Yes.
And worldwide, so.
Yeah.
And we're working with the Rockefeller Foundation right now on a project Keeping Current Sea Level Rise Challenge for South Florida, Miami, Greater Miami. So we're actively involved in Florida as well.
Okay. All righty. Joe?
Okay, we're gonna, thank you. These ladies have done amazing work. So now we're gonna open up if anybody has questions. They kind of have a new sound system here, so I'm basically gonna walk around and pass the microphone around if there are questions. So, yeah, we good?
Hi, thank you so much for coming out to speak to us today. I had a question. I saw in your shipping container modules that they had solar panels on the top. Have you seen a rise in solar panel installations after the hurricane, or even interest from government or residents in solar installation?
Definitely, definitely. There are whole communities that are trying to build their microgrids based on solar, and there are architects in Puerto Rico that have identified, and also, you know, with partners in New York that have identified areas to start a very solid policy on solar panels. This is allied with Tesla that is working with batteries. So there is a technical improvement, I think, that will enable this advancement and also there is an advancement in the legislation in Puerto Rico that enables people to actually use their own generation, which before was not favorable.
So if you look at Puerto Rico Resilient Power, it's a organization started by architect Tesla, some other people. They have plans to put in 100 resilient community hubs as well. And then to know that there was actually an existing large solar field along the Louisa River Basin before Hurricane Maria, and it survived. And so while some of them, maybe roof panels blew off, they have the system down in terms of securing it. So it's definitely, and when you would be in an Uber, the driver would say, I just got 2 panels and put them on my roof so I can run my refrigerator, my air conditioner. So it's a part of, becoming a part of the culture, the independence from the electrical grid.
Thank you so much, Martha and Nancy. This has been so wonderful and so just symptomatic of what we are doing at UF as, you know, as a preeminent university in this state. It's leadership like yours that we really respond to and appreciate. My question relates to some of the work, as you know, I have looked at other islands, US Virgin Islands and so on, regarding their damage from also Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma. Has the impetus that we've started here at UF, how does that impact and extend beyond through the rest of the Caribbean? I give the example of Dominica. While Puerto Rico has had as much damage as it could even conceive of, the damage in Dominica is probably 3 or 4 times worse. And, you know, speaking for myself as a Caribbean person, there is always going to be, in the next 15 years, 20 years, there's going to be another island that has about this much damage. And how can we apply the lessons that we learn here in Puerto Rico, and have we been able to reach out or have people try to reach in to you guys? Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you for your question, David. We really appreciated your collaboration with us. It was important in our setting the tone of how to advance. We have a long-standing cooperative agreement with the university, technical university in Jamaica, which the dean, Carol Archer, visited us. So I think with Jamaica, it would be easygoing to expand this. Other islands, we don't yet have this collaborative possibilities, but we, for instance, the UNESCO insists on this. I mean, for them, it's like fundamental that we expand to the Caribbean. So I hear you. I hope we can work on this together. What can I say?
And you're coming with us this year, right?
Yes, you're coming in March.
You hit on this at the very end, but it seems like after every storm, we rebuild in the same locations. And I'm wondering if in Puerto Rico, if your work is also encouraging government to change code so you can't put buildings right back where they're going to be washed away again, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's, shall we say, FEMA has a mandate, which is rebuild as it was. Rebuild as it was before the damage. Now, this is an attitude, of course, that takes us to rebuild again and again and again in the same harm's way. So that is heavily under revision now, at least in Puerto Rico. I don't know if for the whole of FEMA, but it's impossible. They have realized that they can fund it once, maybe twice. By the third time, its funds are not available for reconstruction in harm's way. So on that, I think there is a change of sea, you know, in the agency, which we have talked this with multiple persons through the sectors.
At the conference Martha mentioned in this last December, a year ago, last December, Craig Fugate was the opening keynote speaker. And he really foreshadowed this. We can't continue to do this. Of course, he had stepped down January 2017, but his experience from 2009 to 2017 and all the storms, he said, we cannot continue to do this. It doesn't make any sense. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really, I think Puerto Rico and the governor's office is saying, we're not going to do it that way. So we're going to take this funding and we're going to do it in a different way. So there's a mandate coming from the governor's office, which is really important. And the FEMA people that we're working with are on board with it. It makes sense to them.
Has the storm and
Tom.
has the storm and the subsequent necessity to build so much back had any effect on the talk of statehood for Puerto Rico? Statehood for Puerto Rico.
It reminds me, once I went to Venezuela, you know, in another decade in the past, and I was working in the Metropolitan University, and the radio came to interview me. We were talking urbanism, and he came and asked me, are you going to, as a Uruguayan, are you going to allow Venezuela to enter the common market of the South, Mercosur? I said, I'm not prepared to answer this question. You know, just I don't know.
I have a question. 44,000 buildings may be abandoned, is I think what you said. Could you explain how long it takes to make a determination of whether they're really abandoned, and what procedures do you have to go through to make that establishment?
Yeah, well, that's what Centro is doing. That's where the Center for Puerto Rican Studies and Hunter College, CUNY has been doing, and they have been doing an inventory. The 300,000 abandoned vacant homes, they have 57% of them they have identified as foreclosed or just completely abandoned. So they've done the inventory, they have assessed that.
And the planning board is also working on that because one of the differences between, shall we say, mainland and Puerto Rico is the land deeds are not clear. They have been handed down, settlements by, rural settlements, and the landowner allows these workers to live in this, and then the son of the occupant, and then the grandson of the occupant. Now he is 50, and you ask him, where is the papers? I have no papers. I have no papers. So arriving to a regular state of taxation, because that's what they are really in the back trying to make more regular. It's important, right? So before you have to understand who owns what, and then what are the actions that are possible. There is a law that is called like public nuisance. So an abandoned home, an abandoned building which is full of rats and invaded by pests of all sorts, and it can be declared a public nuisance, and then the state takes hold of it.
But the tendency is to try and find a way to give tenure, land tenure. That's the effort in the governor's office. As much as I can, they want to do that.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if this has been covered in materials that you've presented previously, but I was curious. I've followed, the use of shipping containers as possible housing and other kinds of enterprises. But I'm wondering how that would work on an island surrounded by an ocean filled with salty water. Is there something special that you do with the shipping containers that would make them be able to last for a very long time against the elements that they'd be involved with?
We have to refer to specialists on this, right? I mean, there are architects that specifically work with shipping containers and the coatings that can be added to them for their longevity. But I think that we have foreseen their use as a shelters, as a shall we say intermediate uses to be located in very difficult sites where building something would be much more complicated than actually retrofitting a container with a medical facility and be able to locate it in a remote location. We can have, or we even thought, 200 locations. We have 6 typologies of these modules. It's somebody's contract, to actually develop 600 of these and put them up in the mountain. So we are hoping that somebody will hook up on the idea that these could be solutions.
I think we have time for 2 quick questions. So this gentleman and that young lady.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Anselmo Deporte. I'm visiting environmental planner from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And, and I would like to know, as far as you mentioned La Playita, have you been able to meet with the Proyecto Enlace, which is the Martin Peña Channel project that was honored of the prize for Habitat 3 in Quito, Ecuador? Yes.
Especially we met the professors from the Polytechnic University that are mainly linked to this project, and I think it was an interesting and important model to be highlighted about how to operate with a, shall we say, informal settlement by the water. The only discrepancy between our outlook and this one is that if we have sea level rise and longer term expectancies of more storms, it will become very difficult. Even respecting or with respect with the community efforts to actually solve with their own efforts and with their own hands and with their own initiative, which is, I would say, very valiant and very admirable. But on the longer term, I don't know if we can generalize the project to the other areas that are in the same situation.
On the other hand, the model, the community trust, as a way for these informal settlements to get tenure is an interesting model. So it's an important precedent.
One last question.
Hi, thank you once again for your work. You mentioned a few times that since Maria, the Puerto Rican government has realized that it needs to change its plans and has focused on resiliency. I'm just interested in knowing, with your experience working with representatives of the island, how they have sort of remarketed and accepted, aid, whether they are feeling vulnerable, how their attitude has changed, and how they're promoting that sort of resiliency.
Well, the core three really arose out of the 100 resilient cities, because San Juan was one of the 100 resilient cities. And so they had in place a resiliency office. And they were instrumental, and the method of the 100 resilient cities was implemented immediately after Hurricane Maria. And so they have this Reimagine Puerto Rico, where they're using some of the strategies from 100 Resilient Cities and Rockefeller Foundation. And so that found its way up to the governor's office. So I think it's a success story for the program, Rockefeller program.
Yeah, it's just one step down from the governor. So it's not some agency back there, It's very centrally located, and they are very focused.
Okay. Well, I really want to thank these outstanding faculty members who I think just epitomize what a top 10 university is like, as David mentioned. And I want to thank you all for coming. We have more of the Explore magazines in the back. If you want some more detail, feel free to take them. I'm sure Nancy and Martha, if you have something you didn't get to ask or whatever, will be around for a few minutes. We do these about once every 4 months. Explore comes out 3 times a year, so keep an eye open and join us again. Thank you for coming.